Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah everyone for being here today. My name is Noman Hassan. I'm a resident physician in the field of general surgery, practicing out of the community of Hamilton, Niagara in Ontario. I am honored and delighted to be the host of today's career guidance webinar. At this time, I would like to invite Hafiz Wajiullah Khan Sahib for the recitation of the Holy Quran and translation.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الذي خلقني فهو يهدين والذي هو يطعمني ويسقين وإذا مرضت فهو يشفين والذي يميتني ثم يحيين والذي أطمع أن يغفر لي خطيئتي يوم الدين. I will now present the English translation of the verses just recited, taken from chapter 26, verses 79 to 83. In the name of Allah, the Gracious, the Merciful, who has created me, and it is He who guides me, and who gives me food and gives me drink. And when I am ill, it is He who restores me to health, and who will cause me to die and then bring me to life again, and who, I hope, will forgive me my faults on the day of judgment. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah Hafiz Wajiullah Khan Sahib. For our audience, we're gathered here for our very first career guidance webinar on medicine, dentistry, and allied health. Under the guidance of Hazuri Anwar Ayatullah Ta'ala bin Nasr Aziz, the Talim department is in process of establishing a national team of professionals from all walks of life who can guide and help our younger generation. Today's webinar is a small effort to initiate a conversation on how we can help and guide. Our aim is to find interest through these webinar sessions and to hold one-on-one career guidance sessions in the future, inshallah. We're joined today by an esteemed panel of professionals from the fields of medicine, dentistry, and paramedicine. I'm honored to provide a brief introduction of our panel today. We have amongst us Dr. Tasif Khan, who graduated as a medical doctor and then completed his PhD in epidemiology. He is currently a research associate at the University of Toronto. He specializes in research on honey and other sweeteners. Dr. Tasif Khan is also serving as the National Talim Secretary, Canada. Assalamu alaikum, Tasif Sahib. Jazakallah for being here with us today.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Next, we have Dr. Khizar Karim Sahib. He completed his medical school at the University of Toronto and is currently a general surgery resident at the University of Toronto. His academic interests include lung transplant, lung cancer, and minimally invasive and robotic surgery. He is actively involved in mentoring students and is currently serving as Naib Motmi Umur Talaba. Assalamu alaikum, Khizar Karim Sahib. Jazakallah for being here today.
Jazakallah, Dr. Sahib.
I think we're still waiting on Dr. Fawad Khan Sahib. I'm hopeful he will be joining our esteemed panel soon. I'll give a short introduction while he's not here in case he joins. He completed his medical school at Queen's School of Medicine and went on to complete a residency in family medicine from McMaster University. He's currently working as a hospitalist at St. Joseph Brat Hospital in Burlington, and he's actively involved in Jama'at and is currently serving as a regional coordinator for Ahmadiyya. Jazakallah Fawad Bhai for being here with us today. Sorry, I caught you off guard as soon as you joined. I don't know if he'll be able to, but we'll move on. Next, we have Dr. Zubair Machata Sahib. He graduated from Western School of Medicine and Dentistry and is currently practicing as a dentist in London, Ontario. Jazakallah Zubair Bhai for being here with us today. I appreciate your time.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Next, we have all the way from St. John's, Dr. Umar Mali Sahib. He completed his dentistry from Baqai University, Pakistan, with specialization in endodontics. I'm going to have to know more about that. But by the grace of Allah, he took his bath in 2010 after the Lahore mosque incident. He later came to Canada as a skilled immigrant and went back to school. Hats off to you for that. He graduated from Dalhousie University Dentistry and is currently practicing in St. John's, Newfoundland. And he's also serving as the president of the local Jama'at. Jazakallah Sessa for being here today.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Jazakallah for having me.
And then next we have respected Imran Muhammad Sahib from GTA. He completed his BSc at the University of Toronto and went to Centennial College Paramedics program. He completed his internship at Toronto Paramedic Services, and he is currently serving full-time for the City of Toronto and part-time for Region Appeal. He's been serving the GTA as a paramedic for the last 4 years. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah, Imran Bhai, Jazakallah for being here once again.
Wa alaikum assalam warahmatullah. Jazakallah for having me.
Jazakallah to our esteemed panels once again, and Jazakallah to our audience for taking this time out to be here and joining us. We are looking forward to the presentations that we have today. We have 3 presentations in total. One would be on medicine, and the other one on dentistry, and last but not least on paramedicine. And it is our hope that we will continue to hold these webinars in the future where we can address and highlight some of the other professionals within the field of medicine and allied medicine. Before we start our presentation, I would like to let my audience know that they can ask questions through the question and answer panel on the bottom of their screen. It could be anonymous as they wish, and these questions will continue to collect as we go through all of our presentation, and inshallah our hope and target is to answer them at the end of this presentation during our question and answer session. So my request would be to, if you have a question or you have a feedback of any sort, please put that through the question and answer session panel, and we'll continue to register them and hopefully inshallah answer them at the end. To begin our program further, to take our program further, at this time, I would like to request Dr. Khizr Talim Sahib for his presentation on career in medicine.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Jazakallah, Dr. Saab, for that kind introduction and segue into the presentation. I just want to confirm, are we able to see the screen and hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah to all parents, students, and members of the Jama'at who are interested in pursuing a career in healthcare. Inshallah, we'll try to provide some guidance, and the purpose of this talk is to be more brief in nature and facilitate more questions. So if there's something that's not answered, we will definitely try to solve it in the question. So please keep in mind of that. So there's 2 objectives for my talk. Firstly, what is and why should someone pursue a career in medicine? And number 2, how one can exactly do that. I will say that I'm on the admission committee at the University of Toronto, so I can't speak in that much detail about the University of Toronto specifically, but obviously more than happy to speak about the process in general and how to make yourself competitive. To give a brief introduction to myself, I'm not sure if many parents or students were at the previous talk for about IB programs in high school and how advantageous it is. So I want to give reassurance to those students who are not in IB programs that they can also get into medical school. So I went to high school in Heart Lake in Brampton, and this was your run-of-the-mill, very normal high school, nothing special about it at all. Then I went to McMaster University, where I did my undergraduate studies in life sciences. And then by the grace of Allah Almighty, I was fortunate enough to get accepted into medical school at the University of Toronto. And to give some parents some context, this is the fifth ranked med school in the world and #1 in Canada. And then afterwards, I even had more mercy from Allah the Almighty that I was fortunate enough to stay in University of Toronto for my general surgery residency, which I'm doing right now. And currently it's the 3rd ranked program in the world for surgery, only behind Harvard and Johns Hopkins. And the reason why I'm giving these stats is to show you that, if someone has without any sort of advantage, without any sort of formal mentorship, or someone who really hasn't anything special can, go to medical school, then it's very much possible and more likely for lots of students in this class to do this as well. So the first is what is and why choose a career in medicine. So the reason why I think someone should pursue a career in medicine is that, there's so many aspects to it that I think reflects a lot with a diversity of one's interest. When we think about medicine, the first thing that comes to mind is that doctor-patient interaction, which you can see in the top left, which is typical of medicine, providing that direct clinical care. But at the same time, you also, doctors are involved in the research process as well, thinking about from basic science to clinical research to drug development. That's a huge part of the role of a physician as well. Secondly, as you can see in the top with our Dr. Lam, who is the Chief Medical Officer of Canada, that physicians also play a great role in politics, legislation, policy, and decision making. They're also involved in quality improvement, systems of the hospital, how things work, and delivery of healthcare to communities as well. On the right, you can see Dr. Dennis, who's actually a Nobel Peace Prize winner. He was a physician who set up hospitals in, I believe, in Africa. And it goes to show that doctors are also humanitarians as well and have a huge social responsibility. And at the last but not least, doctors are also involved in tech, startups, business, and a lot of these different things. So really a career in medicine is more than just providing direct clinical care to patients. It's much more than that. And with medicine, there's almost 30 different specialties. So depending on your personality or interest, there's always a specialty for you. On this chart here, if we follow it, if you're somewhat of a normal person who's hardworking but has a mean attitude, you might end up like me and go into surgery. But if you're somebody who has difficulty paying attention, you might do emergency medicine. So this is like more on the joking side, but you can see that there's so many specialties with different personalities that medicine has room for everybody and all their interests. If you're somebody who likes technology, who likes to learn, who likes a rapidly adapting field where you're always on your toes, then medicine is something that you should consider. Here you can see on the left, not too far long ago, how surgery was practiced, very mundane, very, not as elegant as we know it today. But now with the progression of time, it's gotten much more precise. And now with the advent of minimally invasive surgery and robotics, it's the frontier of surgery is quite remarkable. And lastly, one should pursue medicine along the lines of our faith. Our Jama'at has been closely linked to various missions and various hospitals. On the left, we have the Tahir Heart Institute. On the right, we have 2 Ahmadiyya physicians from Humanity First. So, it goes without saying that, this is integral in our faith as Ahmadi Muslims. And it's a great field which complements our identity to serve humanity. So the main reason why you guys are all here, how do I pursue a career in medicine? If I were to summarize the process of pursuing a career, it would probably be this right here. Your GPA or your marks, your MCAT score, which is the score on a standardized assessment test, your research, your volunteer application, your references. All these things play a big role in getting you an interview for medical school. And then after you do the interview, that's when you get into medical school. So if I were to stop the presentation, this is all you need to know. But obviously there's more context to that. Medical school is more like this, climbing a mountain. So we'll talk about each step from high school to bachelor's, and hopefully at the end we'll speak into more detail about some of these things. So in high school, many parents and students come to me that, what is the single most important thing as a high school student I should be doing? And my humble advice is that, I think grades are the top priority for anybody in high school. Many people would give advice that you should be preparing your application, you should be volunteering, you should be doing XYZ. But really at the high school level, your role is to understand how you learn, understand the best way and the most efficient way where you're going to obtain knowledge, and mastering that. Making sure you also take, chemistry, physics, biology, all those core science courses, and really focusing on becoming the best student that you can be. Because once you set those habits in high school, it'll be much easier for you to succeed in undergrad. So, simple things staying simple in high school. The main thing is to worry about your grades and figuring out the best way to optimize that. After you do your high school, you apply to university, and now you're at university. Now it becomes a little more complicated. There's more things involved. So what are the main things in undergrad that I would suggest that you should be focusing on? And I think there's about 3 things that I would highlight to myself if I were to do the process all over again. Firstly, your GPA is probably one of the single highest predictors of your success in medical school. So the GPA it stands for grade point average. It's typically a score out of 4, and it's 4 out of 4 is a perfect GPA. And to give you context, the University of Toronto's average GPA when I was in medical school, it was 3.97, which is almost a perfect GPA. And other medical schools in Canada are not that far behind. It is very difficult to get in, and the GPA is a big threshold to your success in medical school in Canada, I will say. So if you are an undergrad at this time, your single most focus, I would say, is to make sure that your marks are not compromised. That is your most critical mission in undergraduate studies. Next is the MCAT. The MCAT, we'll talk about this later on, but the MCAT is, what standardizes the field for all applicants, regardless of where you went to university. The MCAT will essentially give you a rank where you are on a standardized curriculum. You can write the MCAT about 8 times. And typically students write the MCAT during one of their summers in undergraduate studies. So for me, I see the GPA and the MCAT as the single most important factors that will improve your odds into medical school. And this is what your main focus should be on in undergraduate studies. This is a framework called the CanMEDS framework. And I'm bringing this up because a lot of parents and students ask me, what type of activities should I be doing? And this framework is adopted by the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada, which is the governing body of all doctors in Canada. And this framework essentially contains about 7 traits or characteristics that characterize an ideal physician. So being a scholar, professional, communicator, collaborator, manager, which is actually leader, this is updated, and health advocate. These frameworks are what used to judge medical students, medical school applications, medical students, residents, and also physicians. So these kind of, you'll be evaluated on in terms of these things. So really, when you think about your activities and you think about your extracurriculars, they should be in the context of these roles, because this is kind of what the quote unquote rubric is on how they mark applicants for medical school. Specifically, if we dive more into the activities and the extracurriculars, there's certain rules of, I think, principles that one should follow. This is backwards, but it says quantity over quality, but really it should be quality over quantity of extracurriculars. I think that sometimes students fall into this thought process that if I do 100 different activities, 100 different volunteer activities, it's going to be very impressive to the file reviewers. And sadly, that's not really the case. I think the main principles is that, you should choose maybe 5, 6 things that you are very passionate about. And you should show that you've been very committed, number one. You've been working with this organization or project for a longer period of time. And you showed advancement in that commitment as well. I think that shows more value. It shows more about your character traits. And it hits more of those CanMed roles that we talked about before as well. For instance, if I look at my application, under leadership, I wrote AMSA president, where I served when I was at McMaster. For collaboration, I worked in different teams within AMSA, different teams within Jama'at, and these were all people with different skill sets. So working with them, you learn a lot about collaboration, how to work with people, conflict resolution, goal sharing. So those are skills that you can highlight in your application. Advocacy is also a huge one as well. Advocacy really means kind of talking and raising awareness and speaking about individuals or groups that can't speak for themselves. I was fortunate that I was involved in Majlis Ansar Talim, which is a group of Khuddam that write the newspapers. And I was fortunate that this was kind of like my highlight for my medical school application. And this is what the admission committee actually liked quite a bit. So essentially, it goes to show that you just have to pick some activities that you can really shine in. And this is kind of what the general principle should be when it comes to think about activities and extracurriculars. And as you can see, you don't have to go far to find out some of these activities. We have so many different things in Jama'at and Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya that honestly, if you're involved, your extracurriculars should really take care of themselves. That's my personal opinion. So really, the main thing that is in your corner and that's in your control is the GPA and the MCAT. I would say that is way more important than any extracurricular. It should be not sacrificed for any extracurricular. That is your main thing that you have to focus on. Next is the idea of research. So research is essential in the sense that it's one of the CanMed roles under scholar. Now, at the undergraduate level, it's obvious that not many people may have interest in research, and that's totally fine. But if you look at the medical schools in Canada, a lot of them are academically focused, and a lot of them like having students who are interested in research. So being involved in undergraduate studies is recommended, and the same principles apply. It's important, I would say, to have something that you've completed, and if you get a publication, that's awesome. But really showing the fact that you worked with one person for an extended period of time, you built a relationship, you were productive, and you demonstrate what you learned is much more valuable from an admissions perspective than working on 10 different projects and nothing move forward. Next is the big beast, which is the MCAT. The MCAT stands for the Medical College Admission Test. It is a standardized test that is used in North America to help measure the aptitude of applicants. It's divided into 4 sections. The first one is biochemical, essentially biology and biochemistry. The second one is essentially chemistry and physics. The third section is about psychology, sociology, and the last one is critical reasoning, verbal comprehension. Each section is marked separately. The maximum score you can receive for each section is 132, and the maximum score you can receive on the MCAT is 528. And the score of 500 is typically the median or the average. And this is kind of a standardized score. So it follows a bell curve or a normal distribution, as opposed to an absolute score, an absolute percentage. Meaning to say that if your percentile is 50 and your absolute score is whatever, if you fall under that percentile, your score will be 500. Now, the MCAT, I will say, is, if somebody did not have the best GPA, your MCAT is one of those things that can be a saving grace for you. I will say again, the MCAT requirements are increasing yearly. across all across all medical schools. So this is something that I will say that students need to seriously consider as soon as possible. The focus of this talk is to give you a broad overview. You can have a talk about the MCAT itself, and maybe that might be something for the future. But the MCAT is one of the most critical components of the application. And we can talk more about that in questions if needed. This is just a statistic showing that the competitive nature of medical school, that in Ontario alone, there are almost 22,000 applications for an acceptance rate of 4.4%. And I want to harp on this point because, medical school in Ontario is not an easy, or in Canada is not an easy thing. And the biggest predictors are really your GPA and your MCAT score. The higher these two things are, the highest likelihood you will have of success in this process. This is a general training map of undergraduate students, how they should think about their time in undergrad. A few things I should mention about undergraduate studies, which I forgot to mention now that I remember. What undergrad should students pursue? Now, my advice is that, medicine is a science. The MCAT is a science test, essentially. So pursuing a undergraduate studies in a core scientific discipline is recommended because the content you'll learn is something that you'll need anyways. Now, that being said, it's not a strict requirement that you need to have a degree in sciences. You can have it in sociology, literature, film studies, anything like that. But really, science is probably the best way to go about doing that. As you can see here, this is a roadmap of how students should think about their studies. The first year, up until honestly the third year, should be about completing the courses, building relationships. But as you can see early on in the summer or first year is when you should start thinking about research, MCAT, and different activities that kind of set you up along the line. And then these slides will be available, so no need to write this down. Next, we'll talk a little bit more about the actual application process and what that looks like. So as you can see, medical school in Canada, there's a very distinct process, but there's other places where you can apply as well across the world, and they each have their own process and their own requirements. So I'll speak about the medical school process here in Ontario specifically. The process of the application is called OMSAS. And for the life of me, I can't remember what that stands for, but OMSAS, if you can type in Google OMSAS 2022, you can open up the application file and see exactly what the requirements are to complete a medical school application. My humble request for anybody interested in medical school is that you should open this up and study the application. There's a lot of information, a lot of things you can learn from the application that should actually guide your medical school, your undergraduate journey. You can see kind of what they look for, what they ask for in terms of the activities, what specific things that will be required. That way you can tailor your activities to those requirements. Now, the application typically in medical school, there's two parts. There's that primary application, which is sent through a portal like this, and then afterwards you get secondary applications depending on the school. Secondary applications mean additional essays. Now, what goes into the primary application right here? There's a few things. Number one is going to be your personal information, where you went to undergraduate studies, your undergraduate grades, all of your transcripts, including summer school, all that stuff. If you did a master's, all that stuff as well. Your activities and your references. Your activities, essentially, you would have to write, for instance, that I did a leadership activity in this was my role, and then you would have about 100 to 200 maybe character description about kind of what you learned and all those good things. And next, I would say is your references. Typically, I believe that maybe things have changed, is that you have 3 reference letters that you need to fill an application for medical school in Ontario. There's a lot of questions about these reference letters. Should they be from physicians? Should they be from people who are quote unquote prestigious? And really, I think the reference letters principle should be that they should be strong, meaning that they should talk about your skill set as a person, your characters, your skill set as a professional, and really it should be from a person who knows you best and who is in a professional position to speak about you. And when I say professional, I don't necessarily mean a physician. This can be a community leader. This can be a volunteer supervisor. This can be a research supervisor. It does help that if it is a physician, just because there is that level of trust that physicians share with each other, but really a mediocre letter from a physician versus an absolute fantastic letter from, for instance, your guide sub, I would prefer that fantastic letter. So really, you want strong letters that speak to your characteristics, and that's really kind of the guiding advice, I would say. And your personal essays. Now, the question is, for personal essays, what are the guiding factors and how do you go about it? And really, it comes back to those CAN-MED principles that I spoke about earlier on. You know, a lot of the times, these personal essays will ask you, for instance, what does it mean to be a professional? What does it mean to be a health advocate? What does it mean to have good communication? So really, you know, you would have to really dive deep into these qualities and write your responses in reference to this. You can Google CanMed, and there's wonderful documents out there that show you exactly kind of what each of these competencies mean, and you can learn a lot from them and really use those things in your application to really strengthen it in the Canadian system in that context. Now, let's say you went through that whole shebang. Now you're at the interview stage. You know, this is where kind of now it's you know, you've done the hard work, and really, if you're at the level of the interview, it's quite impressive, because if you think about it, for instance, I can't say University of Toronto, but other universities, they filter out a lot of volume of applicants, and they invite select individuals for the interviews. And if you met that threshold for the interview, it means that your grades are satisfied, your grades are fine, your MCAT is fine, your application was stellar, your references are good. Now it's all about you. Like, who are you as a person? At that point, nothing else really matters. And there's different ways schools interview you. There's what's called a multiple mini interview. And it's a series of about 8 stations, about 10 minutes long, where you meet somebody for 10 minutes and you answer very specific questions of very specific scenarios. And then that really kind of helps them to learn more about you and to get a sense of if you're a good fit for their medical school. Other schools have the traditional interviews where you sit in front of somebody or a panel for about 40 minutes and you have no idea where the conversation is going to go. And then you have some combination of both as well. And quite often the likelihood of interviews is about 50-50. So one can say that's good or one can say that's bad, but I think that if you have a 50-50 chance, you should bet on yourself and really prepare for the interview as much as possible. My experience in the interview process, the reason why a lot of people don't make it past the interview stage is lack of preparation. If you really take that time to learn about yourself, prepare your answers, go through all the different scenarios, you're gonna set yourself up for success. Things to worry about and general mistakes things to take caution for. Number one is not being able to get your personality across. In your application, we talk about CanMeds and those competencies, but you also need to have somewhat of a narrative. Why does medicine, why is it important to you? And the answer can't be to help people. It needs to be a little more deep than that. Number two, applying too early with unrealistic expectations. The thing is that if your GPA is not up to par, you will not really reach that threshold for medical school. So it's being realistic with yourselves, going on Google, seeing what the requirements are, and seeing that if you're competitive for this year, because it can be quite a costly process. Number three, selecting the wrong references and verifiers. I can't tell you how many times I've come across an application where the reference letter is not supporting the candidate, but also not speaking in favor of them. So making sure the references that you choose will have your best interest in mind is very, very important, I would say. So making sure that's something that's it's crystal clear in your application that these individuals are supporting. Next is making any sort of silly mistakes in the application process, grammar mistakes, spelling mistakes, uploading the wrong file. A lot of these things will just get your application thrown out without anybody looking at it. And you'll be very, very surprised that in 1,000 applications, 100, 150 will be thrown out for any of these reasons, not even because of their GPA. So these are like really common pitfalls to avoid and to think about as well. Now, obviously, you know, the process is not perfect. You can have the best application, and sometimes, you know, great candidates don't get in all the time, and it happens. Now, the question is, what do you do in that case? My humble advice is to keep trying. Medicine is a marathon, not a sprint. With each application, you learn about yourselves. Unfortunately, you can't actually get feedback from medical schools as to why they rejected you. But this is where, you know, we come along and we can help with that. Number two is, you know, pursue master's, PhD, other research, focusing and strengthening your application. And number three, you know, it's considering other options as well. You know, Canada isn't the only place where one can become a doctor. Although it's one of the best places to become a doctor, where you can get very world-class training, there's America, Europe, and all these different places as well, which we can talk about. There's also caveats and nuances with that as well, I will say, especially when coming back to Canada. But again, Canada is not the end-all be-all. And essentially, that's the presentation. Again, the purpose of this was to give you a drive-by introduction about medicine, not to be comprehensive in any way. And inshallah, during the question and answer session, we can talk more about specifics that parents or students might have. But jazakallah, everybody. And again, to say that, you know, medicine is a daunting place to get into. But again, you know, I came from a place without any sort of IB, any sort of formal mentorship or anything like that. My younger brother is also a medical student as well. So if two guys like us can do it, anybody can do it. So not to worry, we're here to help. And inshallah, we'll speak to in more detail about that later in this talk. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah Kazir for that awesome presentation. You have touched on so many points in such a little time that I appreciate you doing that. It wasn't an easy task to cover the career of medicine and getting in such a small time. But I think you've hit the nail. You've hit some really key points. No path is perfect. Even I remember I was struggling. I got in after my third time, I believe. And we all struggled. I don't know about you, but I can still recall my struggles as to when I wasn't getting in. But, you know, we did different things. I did my master's in doing it. So everyone, as you said, I could totally relate with that. And one point before I move on further is really enjoyed the part where you mentioned all of your Jama'at activities on your application for medicine. And in fact, I did the same thing. And it is often something that I present to the younger guys, younger generation, is that there are blessings in what we do for Jama'at work that we sometimes take for granted. They are actually helping us succeed in a life outside of Jama'at. In worldly manners, they train us. They train us how to speak to each other, how to be a professional. All those CanMed framework that medicine is looking for, all of that, if you do the basic Jama'at work and you come up from the root, you will be prepped for it. You just have to believe in it, and the blessings will come along with it. Jazakallah, because once again, we'll move on to our next presentation by Dr. Zubair Ahmed Chatta Sahib on dentistry. We'll keep it, I'd like to remind everyone that if you have a question, please put in the question and answer panel. I like to remind the presenters to be on time just so that we can save time at the end for question and answers. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. My name is Dr. Zubair Ahmed Chatta. I'm a dentist here in London, Ontario. I'll try to be quick and wrap it up. Most of the points that were covered by Dr. Khizr Khareem Saab are similar to dentistry. Quickly about my path, I graduated as well in Brampton, from Brampton Centennial Secondary School in 2003. After I graduated, I had some health issues. I went to Pakistan to do my dentistry. I graduated from the University of Karachi with a bachelor's in dental surgery in 2011. I came back to Canada and I started the US licensing process, and I was unsuccessful doing that. But I just persevered, kept moving on. And 2015, I started doing the Canadian licensing process. And by the grace of Allah, alhamdulillah, I was granted admission to the University of Western Ontario Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry, the internationally trained dentist program, which was a 2-year program. It's no longer that. And I was awarded a Doctor of Dental Surgery in 2021. Currently, I'm practicing in London, Ontario. I also work with the Southwest Middlesex Health Unit with the First Nations communities nearby. And I'm also a clinical instructor at the University of Western Ontario Schulich Dental Clinic, instructing 4th-year dental students. Again, I have a conflict of interest as well, so I can only speak about the admissions process. I cannot speak about the admissions process. I can only give you my insight of how my path was, what to do, what not to do, and how to proceed. And if you have any other further questions, I'll be more than happy to personally contact you as well. Some of the benefits for dentistry, quickly, you're very independent, you're self-employed, you work on your own, you set your own hours. Private practice, I work 3 days a week. 1 day a week, I go to the university to teach, which is a very relaxing day, actually. And then 1 day a week, I work with the First Nations communities at the reserves. There's a lot of reserves nearby in southwestern Ontario, near London. So I get to work on the reserves, and I get to learn about them and their community as well. You get the opportunity to learn and develop new skills, new forms of treatment. For example, there's a new concept, it's called Teeth in a Day. You get to do 1-visit crowns, all the digital aspects of dentistry. From what it was way more hands-on, way more appointments. Now it's less appointments, and you get more treatment done, easy for the patients, easy for the dentist as well. It's very easygoing and comfortable. You get to adapt your own schedule. You get to, I mean, if I want to work, let's say 3 or 4 days a week, I could work around that and choose my own schedule. And then the most important thing is you get to help people in need. So for example, getting a patient out of pain when they're in tooth pain, or they come with an emergency, is very rewarding. And then also regaining a patient's confidence for a new smile. There's so many stories that I could share, but due to lack of time, but it's very, very inspirational when you get to help someone who's been through a lot, just to give them a new smile or a new sense of feeling of hope. And then lastly, there's many opportunities now with the Jama'at as well, doing Wakfi. There's countries in Africa that have established, mashallah, very, very good dental clinics. In Guatemala as well, there's a dental hospital. It's run through the Humanity First USA, but there's an opportunity for us to go there and help out to the people of Guatemala as well. Some disadvantages, I mean, I made this medical and dental, but number one is debt. I mean, you got to get something to get something. Unfortunately, there's no way around it. You spend several years of training and preparing for schools. You go from university, doing your bachelor's of science, to your master's. You do your dental school, and then after that, you do your residency, become a specialist, or like me, going to becoming a general dentist and doing all forms of treatment. You also have a lot of regulation bodies. So for example, the RCDSO, the Canadian Dental Association, and the Ontario Dental Association. The reason I mentioned this as a disadvantage is because in a lot of our settings, there's no collaboration between the two. And unfortunately, you got to answer one and you got to answer the other. So it becomes very, very stressful, which leads to my next point. In that regard. So it becomes very difficult, stressful, especially when you have complications with treatment or unfavorable treatment outcomes as well, where you cannot satisfy or meet the patient's needs or their desired goal. So then next point, it's depressing when you're not able to help. You got to refer them out, or you got to provide or do other forms of treatment that might not be great for that patient. Time consuming, yes, you have to give a sacrifice. You have to sacrifice your family, friends, holidays, money, everything just to achieve that goal. And you have a great deal of responsibility on your shoulders. Patients put a lot of trust in you to go into their mouths and give them any form of treatment, diagnose, and then provide any form of treatment. Then there's always the physical health issues, neck and back problems. Dentists are very known to have an early retirement rate due to disabilities. Due to the recent advents of, new loops or new form or ergonomic chairs, that has significantly decreased. But the best way you can do is invest in yourself, keep active, go to the gym every day, and then inshallah, that won't happen. I guarantee I'm going to get this question. Dentists have a high suicide rate. Yes, but I mean, again, it's also related to lifestyle and activity. It used to be that case, but no longer. It's not up there anymore. But again, it's physical, mental health issues that get involved as well. The avenues towards dentistry in Canada, there are 10 dental schools that are available for students to attend to and apply to for dental school. The list is provided below, and I'll make it available for all the parents and students as well. And then there's avenues towards dentistry, which we will elaborate if required. But in 2010, there was a reciprocal agreement between three countries, so Australia, New Zealand, and Ireland. Basically, if you attend to schools in Australia, New Zealand, or Ireland, you can come back and write the board exams, which is through the NDEB, which is the National Dental Examining Board of Canada. And once you pass the NDEB exam, you are eligible to apply for a license within a province of Canada. Again, this is a very costly avenue. It is not that easy. It is fierce. Another avenue which has more opportunity is going to the US. There's many more dental schools there. Again, it's very, very expensive. But again, it is an option there that's available for you. Some of the prerequisites required, I think Dr. Grimshaw just touched upon them. Again, grades, you need 90+ averages, GPA equals success. I mean, as long as you get that, you can do very, very well in achieving or being admitted towards a dental school. You need your DAT, which is your dental admission tests, official transcripts from your interior universities. A lot of universities have developed the Casper test. Basically, it's a test of your perceptual ability and the way you think. A personal statement and the online application. So personal statement, I forgot to write again, reference letters. Again, they do usually ask for about 2 to 3 reference letters. Most importantly, shadow local dentists, volunteer at your university dental society, or develop a university dental society, and then maybe volunteer for mission trips. There's a lot of mission trips that go to Mexico, Dominican Republic, Guatemala, Belize, countries that really require it, and they're not that expensive. You can just volunteer for those mission trips, and the instructors for those trips will usually write you a reference letter, which is very strong as well. So I've seen that very beneficial for a lot of the applicants as well. Most importantly, apply early. And lastly, do not give up. Just to give you insight about me, I applied 3 times to the University of Western Ontario, and I was successful, alhamdulillah, on my 3rd attempt. Again, I'll make this available to you. So these are the courses that are required for the different universities in terms of credits that they look for. The GPA requirements, I'll also make that available. And then lastly, the dental admission test and the Casper requirements that are also part of the application prerequisites or requirements as well. Lastly, I just want to end this by saying, just do not give up, keep going. And if there's anything that you need from us, we'll be more than happy to assist in any regard. Exactly.
Jazakallah Zubair for that excellent presentation. I really enjoyed the advantages and the disadvantages slides we have. It goes to point out that these careers, as much as they're fulfilling and allows us to give service to humanity, it comes at a cost of our personal, not only personal, but family and all those other desires that we have away from our professional life. And there is certainly a cost, and not only physical, mental, but also financial cost that we pay for it. It is something that we should keep in mind. Again, reminder for questions. If you have any questions, please do put them in the Q&A tab. We do have questions that are coming in that we'll hopefully, inshallah, try to answer at the end of the presentations today. I'll move over to our next presentation by respected Imran Muhammad Sahib on paramedicine.
Alaikum warahmatullah. Jazakallah. Just wanted to confirm, are you guys able to see my screen here?
We don't see your screen yet, Imran bhai.
You guys see it now?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay. So Jazakallah again, Dr. Namabe, for your introduction. I'm not going to take too long regarding my introduction, my background. I think you kind of gave an introduction already. And so if people do have more questions about, what I did and the pathway towards that, I'll let it know, but I'll kind of touch upon it really quickly into when I'm discussing the field of paramedics. So paramedics, I think essentially, or field of paramedicine, I think there's a stigma that I think people kind of forget as to what they do. Paramedics, for myself, we're, frontline healthcare workers. We're usually the first people that, we see people in emergencies, sometimes life-threatening emergencies, in various circumstances in a pre-hospital setting. I think that's the most important aspect, is that it's not in a controlled environment. So we expect a lot of different things. On average, I would say over the past 2-3 years, especially due to COVID, call volume has gone up tremendously. Just in Toronto itself, I think our average call volume went from like 100,000, 150,000 a year to 275 to 300,000 a year. So it's double the amount. So with that being said, if people ever wanted to have an interest in going into paramedicine or even nursing, the current market is great for it because we do need a lot more paramedics, a lot of staff shortages, call volume increase, and a lack of appropriate resources for it. So where do we begin? There's kind of two options that you can go through. 1 and 2, they kind of blend together. Option 1 is kind of directly from high school. Most paramedic programs, they're college-based, and it's a 2-year diploma after high school. Now, with that said, I think people think that just because it's a 2-year diploma that it's an easy thing to get into. I'll tell you, it's very, very difficult. I did my bachelor's of science, and when I was applying to paramedic schools, the average percentile that I had through all my courses was almost about 90%. So here I've written here that when you're applying through high school, you want your advanced functions, biology, chemistry, English, that's the base. And the average percentile role here is about 85%. But if you're really looking to get into a paramedic school, you should aim for 90% or more. Some schools also require a written test alongside your high school transcript. And it's usually basic, like arithmetic questions, basic science and math questions, usually an essay, kind of describing yourself, things like that. It's almost like a semi-interview process. These are some of the colleges that you can find across. I don't know too much, I apologize, outside of Ontario, but in Ontario, these are the main ones. I would say Centennial and Humber are very, very great schools, very good teachers. We even have some doctors who have come by and taught, especially research-based things. And Centennial and Humber, I would say, have a very, very good reputation in terms of being able to get hired right away. The ratio of students coming out from these programs who are getting jobs is very high compared to a lot of other programs across Canada. Option 2, it comes from going through high school and going to a college program, but it's a bridging program. This is actually called a paramedicine degree. So if you want to kind of expand not only the hands-on, but also more so of a theory-based component, you can do a bridging program where you not only get a diploma, but you also end up getting a degree. So you would do your 2 years first. Let's say you do it at Centennial. In this case, it would be Centennial. It's a 2-year diploma in the paramedic program. And then after that, you would do 2 years through UFT at the Scarborough campus, and you would earn an honors degree in your bachelor's of science. There are some people who go this route. I did my BSc separate. And so, but you can definitely go down this route as well. So that way it does help, because in the long run, when you do have a degree and you want to branch out to maybe different things, for instance, you know, you want to go into nursing, you want to go into physician assistant, it definitely helps to having a degree backing as well, and not just your college diploma. Your post-diploma and degree. So after you successfully completed any college program or degree, in order for you to become certified to work across Canada, you have to complete an exam called the AMCA. So it's called an Advanced Emergency Medical Care Assistant. It's about a 6-hour comprehensive exam. It covers pretty much everything that you've learned in school and more. It gives you an array of questions, things that you learn in school, that you have to have on the job, you know, your medical directives, dosaging medicines. There's a lot of case study questions. And like I said before, most, if not all, these questions on these exams are covered in schooling. You have 3 attempts to pass this exam. You need at least 70% or higher. If you do not, for whatever reason, not successful with this, after 3 attempts, you actually have to go back to school and do another semester. 6 hours can be a lot at one time. It can be very grueling, but there's a lot of tips and a lot of different ways that you can study. My studying habits definitely changed when I went from university to paramedic program. And that's something that can definitely be discussed later, or if you guys have a question regarding that, I can definitely help you guys with that as well. When you are applying for a job, I didn't touch too much because of time about, you know, the job process itself, of how much things you have to go through, and I'll try to touch on it quickly. But when you're applying for work in most places, you know, throughout Canada, and I would say in Ontario, because Ontario has, I would say, is the more of the forefront of paramedicine right now, in terms of skill set, things that they're able to do, the different specializations that they have. They're kind of at the forefront of it. So with that being said, you need your AMCA, you need to be first aid and CPR certified. Obviously having your college diploma and your Class F driver's license. Your Class F is basically your ability to be able to operate an ambulance. First aid and CPR is something that I always tell everybody when even I'm at Jama'at events, that everybody should have it. You don't have to wait until you get into a paramedic program or any other healthcare program to do it. You should be able to do it beforehand. It's obviously very beneficial, and it definitely helps out, and also you know, creating a rapport with other people, volunteering and things like that. The specializations in paramedics. So once you actually get a job and become a paramedic, most, if not all, paramedics start off as primary care paramedics. There's 3 different levels of paramedics that you can kind of obtain throughout your career. So as a primary care paramedics, you have a certain number of skill sets, medications, and things you can perform. And as you progress, and if you want to become an advanced care, or right here I have wrote CCP, a critical care paramedic, you know, your skill set broadens. Obviously, you have to do a little bit more schooling, but it creates a amazing opportunity for you to not only, you know, keep yourself busy and challenge yourself in an exciting manner. You know, a lot of these things become even more life-saving when you're dealt with a patient, especially in situations where it's not controlled. So currently right now I am PCP, and inshallah I'm working on, you know, in the next few years or so to become an advanced care paramedic. And like I was saying before, they have a broader scope of practice, which does mean more schooling is required. So if I want to become an advanced care paramedic, I would have to go into school for maybe approximately another year or so. And most paramedics that are here work as primary care paramedics for at least 6-7 years. The reason usually is with that is to become comfortable and being very good as a primary care paramedic. And it's also, it is seniority based as well. A lot of times people don't want to go back to school on their own because it's obviously more money and it's more expensive. So if you wait 6 or 7 years, you can actually do it within the city you work for. And they'll pay for you to do it. So that definitely helps for people, especially if you have family, kids like that. I'll just quickly touch upon critical care paramedics. They are some of the most highly experienced, some of the most essential workers that you'll find in a pre-hospital setting. The things that they've been able to do that I've been on certain calls that they've been able to come to. A lot of times you'll find them through Orange. So Orange, they're a flight emergency care and transport, so either through a plane or helicopter. There's a lot in their scope that they can do that basically being able to stabilize them before they get into, if they have to go into the OR or into the ER. They're pretty much, even doctors even like almost like consider them as like a pre-hospital doctor per se. The information and knowledge that they need it's absolutely, it's incredible. Once you actually, obviously when I touched upon you, there's 3 different levels that you have. There's actually a lot of different units that you can actually join into, which is the great part. Just being a primary care paramedic or just being on the road is one thing, but being able to join specialization groups, that is, I think that's what, creates the excitement for people to stay and have the longevity in these careers, especially because a career like this, it can be very tasking, it can be very grueling, you work long hours, things you can see, people do develop a lot of, stress and PTSD. And so, remaining on your toes and trying to do different things will definitely help out in the long run, not only for your physical, but your mental sanity as well. So these are not all the specialized units that you can join, but I've mentioned some. So we have a tactical paramedics. There's a picture of him here. They're trained with police officers. They assist to provide emergency care to police officers and citizens who become injured during tactical operations. So a lot of times they'll come during hostage situations, active shooters. Tactical paramedics will be there. In Toronto, they have specific Marine unit. In Ottawa, they do as well. Some regions like Peel, they don't, because they are not covering large bodies of water. They provide emergency care, search and rescue, drowning, boating accidents. We work a lot with fire and police when it comes to situations like this, especially with water. And then also here we have flight paramedics. There's something kind of mentioned with critical care paramedics. Orange is, one of the leading flight emergency care or flight ambulances, you could say, throughout Canada. And they're usually used in situations where a land ambulance may take more time to get to a hospital, or more advanced skill set is required. There are a lot of areas, certain areas within Ontario, where a hospital is quite far away. It's it's not within 30 minutes. It could be 40, 50 minutes in an hour, and sometimes time can be a lot. Time is muscle, as we say in the medical field, and so these guys come in very, very handy to be able to do the best that they can to stabilize this person, especially if it's a long transport time, and get to the appropriate facility when needed. I was also kind of touch upon salary expectations. Ontario does pay the highest wages for paramedics across the country. Work is based on a 12-hour day. It switches from nights and days. I knew there's a lot of people who struggled with doing night shifts. It can be very difficult, but you kind of get used to it. Like you said, you kind of have to, divide your time, make sure you're getting, ample amount of sleep, you organize your time, and these things over a course of years that you're working, it will become easier. And with this, honestly, with the schooling, it is very intense. I will say the 2 years that I spent in paramedic school were definitely much, much more difficult than the 4 years I did in my bachelor's in science. And when I tell a lot of people that, they're kind of surprised. And I tell people, I'm like, just because it's a college program, a 2-year paramedic program, it's very grueling. It's very cutthroat. You have to maintain a certain GPA throughout your 2 years. And if you don't, whatever class that may be, unfortunately, you can get kicked out of the program, and then you have to reapply again. And so it's very grueling, because in 2 years, you learn a lot, your skill set, how to prepare, socially. That's a big aspect in this job, mentally, obviously physically as well. Last few years, I've since said there's a lot abundance of opportunity to work. The process in itself, once you want to get hired, if people have questions, I can definitely answer that. But that's pretty much kind of the end of my presentation. So Jazakallah.
Jazakallah, Imran Bhai. Jazakallah for your presentation. Jazakallah for everything that you do. Paramedics, they go to places where doctors don't, where our primary healthcare team don't. They go to active scenes and they put their life at risk, and which is why we see the PTSD quite rampant, more so in paramedics or paramedics in general, more so than primary care at the hospital. We are getting a lot of questions. Jazakallah to our audience for being engaged. I'll ask the panel to see if they can all turn on their videos so we can actually move over to the question and answer session. Our hope is to get through all of them. I know we're running late, but we're going to try to do our best. The first question is a part, there are a few people that have asked the same question, and that goes to Khizr Bhai. I'll ask you this question because I think it's related to your presentation. And the question is, what made you go into medicine?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think what made me go into medicine was really a lot of the things I talked about. I enjoyed science. I enjoyed working with people. I enjoyed technology. I wanted to be in a career that was evolving and changing, and also a career where you made a tremendous impact in someone's life, I would say. And that's not to say that medicine is the only career which satisfies those things. It just happened to be the career which best reflected how I thought those goals would be met. So that's my short answer. It's not a satisfactory answer to some, but that's why I chose the career.
It's always a difficult question to answer. I think everyone has their own reasoning for why they go into medicine. Fawad Bhai, if you have a better answer, please do join and say a few words. But I remember for me, I think it's your future goals, what you want to do in life and what you want to achieve. If there are multiple ways of serving humanity and Jama'at in general, but you got to decide for yourself as to what kind of sacrifices are you willing to make and what kind of motivation do you have to keep going in a challenging profession that's always asking you to do more. Fawad, do you have anything to add?
Assalamu alaikum. Sorry, just with my tardiness, I'm just at work right now. With regards to this question, I think Dr. Khizr Saab has answered it very well, and Dr. Noman Saab. For myself personally, I, as a Bakfino, Hazur Aidullah bin Nasr Aziz has mentioned many times that he would like to see Bakfino students try to pursue different careers, but has especially emphasized going into medicine. And so I think that was a big driving force for me. And then, the rest, you start to develop a passion for these things as you start to tread on that path. So I think that was sort of my journey to medicine.
I can totally relate to that. In fact, I don't know, many people know, but I was actually going to Jamia and I had given my Jamia interview and I was about to move in when I had written a letter like a few months earlier to Hazur, what should I do in life? And he said, go into medicine. And my life changed upside down since then. And I'm, and I would like to say this to the audience is that, having that relationship, as Fawad Bhai mentioned, having that relationship with Hazur and establishing that relationship and asking him for guidance is like whatever Hazur says becomes a reality. And that's what I've seen in my life. And I'm sure all of you sitting over here have on personal occasions have mentioned that to me, that has happened in your life as well. And we can all relate to that. There is another question that says that they're asking is, could you give an example of a narrative for wanting to get into medical school, which isn't quote unquote, I like helping people? I think it's something we've already answered, unless someone has anything else better to say, but they're asking for a narrative. Next question, I think most of these questions came in earlier. So the question is your GPA average taken from all 4 years at the university? Yes. If so, what advice can you give to ensure that our marks are high since year one? Because a lot of people say to expect low marks in your first year of university. This is an open question to anyone who wants to answer. Maybe Khizr Bhai or Fawad Bhai. Basically, they're asking is what is what would you recommend for maintaining high grades in university, knowing that it's going to be difficult in the first year of life?
I mean, we can have a talk about this in and of itself, but I think, you know, what we discussed before, I think it really starts in high school, making sure your habits and how you learn and understanding those things are very critical to success in university. You know, obviously university is a transition, and I think that's the big reason why maybe sometimes people aren't as successful in first year as many other years. But, you know, you have 4 years to build your GPA. And the nice thing about some medical schools is that some schools will either forgive your first year of undergraduate studies, or they'll forgive your last your worst 8 courses. So I think you know, there's no kind of shortcut to good grades. A lot of it is just hard work and you know, doing the steps necessary to do that. So really, I think that's the crux of the answer.
It's another question.
As a follow-up, can I ask a question from Dr. Khizr Karim Saab?
Yes, please.
Like, you know, GPA is based on university undergrad. So is high school, I want to ask this question because sometimes kids, they may not have performed really well in their high school, but still have the drive and ambition to go to a med school, but, you know, just for them to see if they still have the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. The GPA is only it's from your undergraduate studies. So absolutely, if you know high school wasn't that successful, you'll have to work double to be successful in undergrad for sure.
Another question for Khizr Bhai. Did you do IB program or take any AP classes?
I did the exact opposite. I actually took one applied course in high school. I think I took applied French actually. I took no special high school. My high school is probably, I think, ranked one of the most dangerous high schools in Brampton, actually. So quite the contrast to a lot of the IB programs. And my younger brother and I, we are both he is in medical school now. So again, this goes to show that prayers, Jama'at work, hard work, that is probably the key elements you need. Everything else is secondary, and obviously it helps, but those are more so important than any special program or anything like that.
I can concur with that. Moving further, what the question is, I think this is a good question and addresses most of our audience. Tips for studying for MCAT, which is a question full of it, but it's a difficult question to answer. Fawad Bhai, how did you study for MCAT and find success?
I think everybody studies a little bit differently in general. So I know it's very cliche, but whatever works for you. For myself, I think I needed to have I think I tried actually to be organized that summer to study. I think I dedicated, 3-4 months. Unfortunately, I didn't do all the courses that were covered in the MCAT, so I had to do some extra studying. So I think it depends on if you've already taken the courses and you already have a lot of that knowledge base, then you don't need to study as much. But definitely dedicating time in the summer, if that's 2, 3, 4 months, having an organized schedule. There are prep courses as well that sort of keep you on track and sort of encourage people to follow a regimen. And then, just remember that the MCAT, most people don't necessarily do well the first time. So I think that's really important to remember that, doing a lot of practice tests and knowing that, if you don't do well, that inshallah, if you repeat the test, you'll do well the second time. So I think that's important to know.
Jazakallah Fawad Bhai. Do you have anything to add, Khizr Bhai, or anyone else?
No, I think Dr. Fawad Bhai nailed it.
Jazakallah. How one should decide about undergraduate programs? Which undergraduate program one should take to get into medicine? I think this is a question that was partially answered already by Dr. Khizr Bhai. Basically, you can get into medicine from any program, any undergrad program that you like. You can do computer science, you can do non-medicine related undergraduate degree. but you just have to do the prerequisite courses or MCAT and score high on that. The only reason I would advocate to go into a life sciences courses or an undergraduate degree is that it helps you for MCAT. If you do it in the first 2 years of your university, it actually prepares you for MCAT, and you don't have to study as hard for the MCAT. Otherwise, you're on your own for the most part. Do you have anything else, or anyone else has anything to add for that?
No, Dr. Saab, I think absolutely. Your undergrad should focus on kind of what your career prospect should be typically, and it should complement the tests and all those things. So definitely any degree in science is more than sufficient.
We have a dentistry question. How many years does it take to be a dentist in general? I know that undergrad takes 4 years. How long is the process after that? Dr. Mali Sahib or Dr. Chata Sahib, if you would like to address this question, please.
I have basically come through, and I think Zubair and me, we are both on the same boat. We have actually gone through the international dentistry program, and so we did our basic graduation from Pakistan, and then we came in. So we have a slightly different pathways than the other. But generally speaking, after doing your basic degree, then it's a 4-year program for dentistry, and after 4-year program, you are a dentist. You are if you have a DS degree or a DMD degree, both are equal, and you can practice based on your problems, and it's good enough. But then if you want to specialize, then it's separate.
Okay, Jazakallah. This is a question for you, Dr. Chasab. The question is, the mission trips that that you spoke about are normally organized by churches. Are there any organized by Humanity First that undergrad or high school students can go on?
That's a great question. I would have to direct that to Humanity First. Inshallah, we can find out through them to see if there's any that are arranged. I know the Humanity First did arrange it was called a DART program, the Disaster Response Training Program, several years ago before COVID. It was in regards to, like, for example, emergency trips. So I remember Haiti back in I believe it was 2008 or 9, the Pakistan floods, which was in 2010. I for example, I remember when I applied for my dental school, I wrote that it was in remote villages in Pakistan, and for Humanity First, so that my interview was tailored around that. So there was a lot of volunteerism, but besides Humanity First, there's a lot of other organizations that organize trips. There's trips that go to Mexico, Guatemala, Jamaica, Dominican Republic. But I mean, if you'd like more details, I'd be more than happy to share those with you.
Okay. Jazakallah for that. We have a question on when will the nursing presentation be? Tasib Bhai, this is a question for you, inshallah. Our plan is to keep working on these sessions so that we can address all of the allied health professions. Unfortunately, we were not able to put all of them in one webinar itself. But inshallah, and I don't know if Tasib Bhai would like to add anything further to this.
Jazakallah. I think yeah, we still have to cover a lot of fields, but inshallah in the future sessions, inshallah.
There is a question where it says, if I want to get into anesthesiology, will majoring in life sciences be enough? Should I have more specific major like biochemistry? Khazabay, I'll ask you to answer this question.
It's a very specific focus right now, and kudos to you to knowing exactly what you want this early on. I don't think your undergraduate choice will favor or affect your career aspiration in anesthesiology. It's a very niche field with their own specific principles and all this stuff. So if anything, maybe something in physiology might be more important than biochemistry to give you some idea. But really, I think whatever you'll learn in residency. So I wouldn't worry too much about that.
My undergrad was in physiology and pharmacology, and when I did my anesthesiology rotation, it was one of the best things that fit with what I had done in my undergrad. So if that's what you would like to do, then, but it always amazes me how our future generation, they know exactly what to do. At their age, I was lost. So kudos, as Abaya said, it's very nice to see our younger generation motivated and have a clear mind. Another question for Khizr Bhai, what undergrad program do you recommend for someone wanting to go into medicine? Again, the same question, but they're very specific. They're asking for our McMaster associated programs, if you have any.
So I went to the McMaster Life Sciences program. The McMaster Health Sciences program, I will say, has a strong track record of having successful graduates into medical school. And that's not because of the actual program itself, in the sense that, it gives you a unique advantage. I think the advantage of that comes from is the fact that the entrance requirement is so high that you have essentially all the top, applicants all compiled in one program who essentially have the same goal of getting into medical school. So there's a lot of bias associated with that. Again, there's so many different ways, folks get into medicine apart from health sciences, apart from McMaster. And really the crux of it comes that, if you follow those, principles of working hard, doing well on your MCAT, really your program doesn't kind of matter anymore. But I do agree there are some biases with certain programs. The biomedical program at Western Ontario is also another one where a lot of graduates go into medical school. And again, it's more of the fact that people who are interested in medical school, who have high marks in high school, tend to go into these programs and tend to get into medical school. There's nothing unique about the program. The courses are the same. Everything is the same, regardless if you go to Nunavut or Toronto. So it's really depends more on you.
I think this, Jazakallah Ghazabay for that answer. There's another question that's actually is a really good question. The question is, some students get very anxious about the admission and whether they will get in or not. What advice would you give them? To be honest, I remember my years. For 3 years, I was a stress bomb. I hated my life. I hated everyone around me because I wasn't getting into what I wanted to. And my wife and my family can totally relate to that. And medicine, I would say the two things, maybe it was, I think the fact that I didn't get in was a learning process for myself, where I find that persistence and perseverance are two things that keep you going in medicine. You will always find hardships in life and you will always find difficulty, and it's just a matter of seeing beyond that, working on what your weaknesses are and keep on working with them or on them, and to make yourself better for next year. And you pray, and you can only control things that are in your hand. Just remember that. Worrying about what the admission committee will think about me or what, all that has nothing to do in your control except for what you can do yourself. That's my experience. Khizr and Fawad Bhai, if you have anything to add, please.
That's great. I echo all those sentiments. There's some dark days before getting into medical school. There's a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, and I completely relate with that comment. It's not easy. That's the crux of it. It's not something that is easy to achieve, and there's a lot of effort and work that goes into it. And even despite your efforts, you still may not be successful, which is the most heartbreaking thing. And ultimately, it's a tough pill to swallow, but reevaluating yourself, not being shy from your weaknesses, and really kind of hitting those things in the head, and is really kind of the only way to go about doing that. Applying again, I know lots of colleagues who have applied 4 or 5 times, then got in. The masters, PhDs. A lot of my classmates are actually PhD graduates who then did medicine. There's you can go to America. There's a lot of different ways. If medicine is your goal and that's all you want to do, you will get in. It's just a matter of when and where. But I will say that once you do get in, all that struggle in the past immediately gets erased. And then you're just happy and satisfied. So it's definitely difficult, but it's worth the pain.
Zubair Bhai, you wanted to add something, please?
I'm just going to make it quick. I went through the same struggles. I went over almost 11 years without practicing dentistry until I got in, alhamdulillah. And it's hard on the society because when you do something, we also have to answer. So for example, when we would go for, let's say, Jalsa or Ijlas, and people would ask, hey, I mean, what's going on with your dentistry? Or to Pakistan to do your dentistry, what's going on? It was really hard and it was really embarrassing to answer that question. But again, it's all about perseverance. It's all about prayers. Don't give up. I will share a small sentiment of mine. I gave up, and I gave up for 2 years, and I started again. But again, it was one of those do or die situations where if you're in it, you will achieve it. It will happen. It's just a matter of time. Don't look at other avenues. Keep going for it, and inshallah ta'ala, it will happen.
Jazakallah Zubair Bhai for sharing your personal experience. I must take this moment to say that, you know, anyone who's pursuing medicine or wants to get into medicine or is in the process, it's not easy. It's psychologically, it's quite, you know, you don't know what's going to happen in a year or two as to whether you're going to get into medicine or not, or what the backup will be. And it is stressful. And for my parents and everyone and families who are around them, they play a big role. They play a big role in terms of support for them. And I hope and pray that, you know, everyone who's in that situation can find comfort in their surrounding, because otherwise it's a dark place to be. And that's where a lot of your mental health issues come into play. And I think we need a supportive environment. And I'm all, you know, and I can relate this on basis of everyone over here, that we are happy to share. If anyone is out there and needs someone to just vent or talk to about this, we're always there because we have been there. We've all been there. We've all had a difficult time. So stay in there, keep praying, and persistent and perseverance, two things. I think Dr. Malisam has something to say.
I just want to make sure that I give a personal account of what happened as well. I came to Canada in 2012, and I was even though a practicing dentist in Pakistan, but had to start from scratch. So most of my friends and family around me, they gave me anything but the right advice, and not because they didn't love me or they didn't want me to succeed, but because that's what they thought the best advice was. So somebody told me that you should start driving taxi. Somebody told me to you should go into trucking, and some you would say yeah, medicine, dentistry, I don't think they accept people of color here, and it's a lot of racism, and they would try to tell me that this is what, and everybody has their own idea of success. So what I'm trying to say is, and I want to make shout out to somebody who has been really great guide to me, and he said that just focus on what you think you are supposed to do. Have a plan A. You should not have a plan B. Even though it sounds cliche, but this is fact. You will get everybody try to guide you, and that may pull you in different directions, but you should focus, and as Zubair Saab said, you should pray, and with perseverance, everything will be fine, inshallah.
Jazakallah Sasa for sharing your personal experiences. We are running late. We have a lot of questions, Tasib Bhai, a lot of them that haven't been answered. But keeping things that we wanted to finish at the very latest at 1:30, we'll keep that in mind. For those questions that haven't been answered, my apologies. But if you have a specific question that still hasn't been answered, I will request you to contact the Talim department. I think the email will be provided by the end of the program, and we can get back to you through email or other forms of media to and make an effort of answering your questions. Jazakallah everyone for being here today with us. I must say that it is difficult. All these professional careers are difficult to get into, and we have discussed the criteria for getting in. I know it's difficult, but it's doable. And for that, I think we need, again and again, we need prayers. We need a connection with Allah Ta'ala. We need a connection with Khalifatul Masih. And if we seek for guidance and prayers from Hazuri Anwar Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Nasr Aziz, it magically comes true. And I've experienced it. There are multiple people on this Zoom webinar that have also experienced the same. So you just gotta be persistent, patient, and experience that for yourself. For our concluding remarks, I would like to request National Secretary Talim Sahib to please say a few words before we end this webinar.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah for all the audience that came today and everybody on the panel. Jazakumullah Hasan Jaza for these excellent presentations. So this is a series of career counseling sessions that we'll be holding. Plus also, I think we have a lot of very good questions still that we haven't answered. And I think if we start answering them, it will take another hour or so. But the solution would be that we'll end the program for most people. But if somebody wants to stay, so Khizr Saab has agreed that he will stay for another 10 minutes to answer some of these questions rapidly. Other people can leave, but we can answer a few after the program ends, inshallah. And anybody who wants to stay for another 10 minutes would be fine. But I also want to say that this program will be, inshallah, a recording will be put online, inshallah, later today. We'll try to put it later today. So you don't have to, so all the slides and everything will be there, inshallah. And lastly, this is not the end. So all the panelists here are now part of a career counseling committee. And we can hold workshops, one-to-one workshops or group workshops with the audience of people who want to learn more about medicine, dentistry, allied health. We are there. You just have to email talim@ahmadiyya.ca, which I put in the chat. And we are here to help you. If you need personal help, we'll sit down with you personally and help you in your career path, inshallah. So Jazakallah, everyone. I'll be staying, Khizr Saab will be staying, and if anybody wants to stay for another 10 minutes to answer some of the rapid questions, we'll do that. But Jazakumullah Hasan Jaza, this concludes the program.
Jazakallah, everyone. If anyone wants to leave, they can. The rest will quickly run through the questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
This is a repetitive question. So how much does it hurt your medical application if you failed or withdrew from a course during undergrad?
Depends on school to school. Some schools will forgive your 8 lowest marks. Some schools will forgive 1 year. You'll have to do the research and figure out what schools will do what.
Is UWorld good or / recommended source for practicing for MCAT?
It's very good.
I've heard really good things about it. It wasn't there when I did it, but it's there now. Do most Canadian schools consider accumulated GPA? Yes, they do. I'm a first-year medical student at USask, and my goal is to get into dental. They're not sure on which undergrad degree they should do. Is there something that you can answer or that you recommend, Zubair Bhai?
I am not exactly sure. You would have to check the prerequisites for transferring into dentistry. And then I'm pretty sure that one of the prerequisites would be the DAT as well. So you'd have to start there. But again, since you're already at USask, I would also reach out to the admissions committee to see which courses or if you need anything else extra.
Jazakallah. It never hurts to contact the admission office. They're usually pretty helpful if you can contact them early and show interest.
They're very helpful, especially if you're going from one, you're already in that program and you want to transfer over. They're very, very open to that.
Would getting a master's degree help me in medical school?
Some applications, schools will give you points for a master's degree, some won't. So it varies in that regard, but I think it gives you more experiences, more things to talk about in your application. So I think overall it's a positive.
I agree. I did a master's because I didn't get in, and it gave me benefit on my application. But UFT also has a separate streamline for masters who want to go to MD. So that's also helpful. How do letter of recommendations work? Do your references provide you a copy of the letter, or do they upload it themselves?
Typically, they upload it themselves. Most often, you don't see the letter. But one good practice is to make sure that number one, you trust the letter writer, and you also provide them some content, whether that's a CV, reflections of your activities and your experiences to kind of guide that letter. But I think most often than not, you actually don't see the letter. And it's actually a requirement in one of the applications that the letter writer writes that, that this letter has not been seen by the applicant. But that may vary from where you apply to.
Often this applies more for residency applications, but the main question you should ask your referees are, can you write me a good reference letter? And if they hesitate or say no, back off and go to someone else. After you get into medical field, is it hard to stay in?
You have to either consistently fail or do something unprofessional to get kicked out of medical school. So it's quite hard to fail medical school, I will say.
The running joke is, what do you call the dumbest kid who passes med school? You call it him a doctor, or him or her. But the reality is that it's easy to stay in, difficult to get in, compared to, for instance, if you go to Caribbean or any other schools, is easy to get in, but super difficult to stay in. So that's the biggest advantage of going into a Canadian medical school. CARMS pathway in detail. Someone's asking for guidance on CARMS pathway in detail. I think you had mentioned that in your presentation, that you could expand on it further.
Yeah, CARMS is its own talk on its own. It's for those who don't know, CARMS is kind of how the Canadian system chooses their residents. I'm not sure what the context of the question is, but we'll have to. I don't know, Namamba, what do you think?
I think my best recommendation is, I don't want to go into residency at this time, but the best recommendation is look at that framework, and when you're writing your personal letters, use it. And when you're writing, or when you're getting your referees to write your reference letter, ask them to incorporate all those headings and give personal experiences of how you you showed that kind of quality, and that would help you in that would be considered a good reference letter from my perspective.
Yeah.
The other thing I just wanted to mention was the contacting the Ahmadiyya Medical Association. I know that recently there was an email sent by Dr. Saida Zafar. She did the CARMS for asking for referees and invitations for doctors that can host that. So I know the Ahmadiyya Medical Association is very in depth with that pathway, or they can give you more details with that.
This is a question for you, Tasid Bhai. Will there be a ladies session for this program?
I think this session was quite informative. If there needs to be a ladies session, I think Lesna Maila can hold it on their own. If ladies want to speak to ladies, I can maybe speak with the auxiliary organization and see if they can hold their own session. But I don't know the context of why there needs to be a lady session, because for career pathways, it doesn't matter which gender, sex you are.
I think maybe they're trying to silently say that we don't have any ladies representation during this webinar, which I agree with that. I think it's something that we should instill in future webinars.
Yes, in the webinars, if expertise come from different places, if we have expertise where a lady is the most expert available, of course, they can be presenter, inshallah, in the future.
This is another question. The panelists mentioned med school as being very expensive and student debt. My question is how that impacts Vakfinino, especially girls going into medical school. So this is a part question, Green Khizr Bhai and Tasid Bhai.
Is Fawad Bhai still on the chat?
I think he left.
Oh, okay.
Fawad Bhai was Vakfino, no? Naman Bhai, you're Vakfino too?
Gigi.
So how do you answer that question?
So you can get government loans, student loan. Apart from that, you can also get banks are happily, as soon as they know that you get into a Canadian medical school, they basically offer you a line of credit so you can use during medical school. But it is your responsibility to pay at the end of the day, because my plan is to waqf after and once I'm done. But the guidance is that you have to find a way to pay off your student loans before you can go and completely waqf 100%. But in the meantime, you can always do if it's within a month, within a year, you have 1 month that you can dedicate for mission work. You can go ahead and do that while still coming back to Canada or doing other sort of work to pay off the remaining loans that you have taken. It's expensive, but with the loan that's provided by financial institution, it's doable.
Yes, I think the important point is if you have debt, it will be difficult for you to start your waqf at that time with the debt. So it's better to pay it off and try to pay it off. And that's why medical schools in Canada are recommended that you should get in here, because if you try to go outside, it will be very, very expensive. To try to get here, and then that can be paid easily. Outside would be very expensive. It will take you years to pay back that debt. Exactly.
One of the anonymous question is, do you have any recommendation of where one should volunteer apart from Jama'at work?
Honestly, not really. I think that, again, where you have the best experience and the most learning and the best connections is probably more valuable than any certain location. And I'll be honest with you, apart from Jama'at, I didn't really look into any external organizations or anything like that. I will say one thing is that, our Jama'at is involved in so many different projects and so many different organizations that it comes down to how you want to market kind of your experiences. For instance, we do a lot of charity runs. Run for Vaughn, all these different things. And, if your role is helping with social media, you can say that you were a social media coordinator for XYZ years under so-and-so. So I think we have so many rich experiences already, and it's a matter of leveraging them, which I think is more advantageous than going to a different place, starting fresh, all those things. But that's my recommendation. I don't know, Namamba, what do you think?
No, I agree. I absolutely agree. I don't have anything else to add, but far from that. There are a few questions that have asked the same thing about applying to UFT more than once. You can apply to medical school as many times as you want to. There's no restriction on that, from my understanding. Is there, Kizabay?
No, not to my knowledge.
No. How much money is involved approximately?
In the medical school process?
Medical school, yeah, from undergrad to medical school itself.
Undergrad's going to cost you about $40,000-$50,000. Medical school is probably going to cost you, depending on how well you are with your line of credit, around that time, but it can cost more than that. I would say the average, I don't want to give you exact figures, but you're looking into a 6-figure debt for sure by the time you're done medical school.
This is, I think, most of the other questions are surrounding what happens if you don't get into medicine, what other careers, pathways can you take? And I think we need to do more of these sessions to really highlight other allied health professions or business or health administrative pathways that one can take. There is a question about if you finish med school and get a degree outside of Canada, what are the requirements to start working in Canada? It's a heavy question. Depends on where you did your undergrad and what kind of residency did you do. If you just did medical school outside to come back for residency to Canada, it's certainly difficult. And we could hold a session on its own for that. And I don't think anyone has gone through that process, at least from medicine side of view, in this panel. But certainly I think, Tosibay, this is something that we could possibly do in the future because there are a few people who have successfully come back. Perhaps we can involve them into the panel and people can take benefit of their experiences.
Yes, that's definitely, I think, is needed. And plus also there are people who come after they get married outside and the partner, the husband or the wife that comes back here has a medical degree. And then how do you enter the system? Yeah. So I think that cases also happen, those kind of questions that come up. So I think we can have a separate session on that. That's a detailed, and it requires detailed answering and discussion. Inshallah.
I think for the most part we've answered. There were quite a few repetitives, repetitions that I've taken out. So for the most part, we have answered questions. There are a few questions on residency itself. I don't think that's the focus of this session, so we'll keep that for some other time.
Jazakallah, everyone. So this concludes this session, and inshallah we'll hold more sessions in the future. Jazakallah, everyone.
Jazakallah, everyone.
Jazakallah. Hafiz.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.